In this video series, we'll delve into the biblical timeline of history. We aim to uncover the significance of important historical dates, such as the creation in 11,013 BC, the flood in 4990 BC, and even the date when God would bring judgment upon the house of God, the churches, as mentioned in 1 Peter 4:17. We'll also explore the date of Judgment Day, which is also alluded to in the same verse. And you might be wondering what the biblical timeline of history is and why it's important to learn. These dates weren't placed in the Bible arbitrarily. They serve a purpose beyond mere knowledge. God always has a reason for concealing truths within the Bible. These essential dates are not explicitly stated in verses, but require meticulous exploration through comparing Scripture with Scripture, the biblical method for revealing truth, mathematical analysis, and ultimately guidance from God's Holy Spirit. So what exactly is the biblical timeline of history? It's a timeline that spans across the Bible, beginning with the first book, Genesis. This timeline then extends into subsequent books and chapters. Why should we invest time in learning about the biblical timeline of history? The answer can be found in Ecclesiastes 8:5. Whoso keepeth the commandment shall feel no evil thing, and a wise man's heart discerneth both time and judgment. To comprehend the current time or season, understanding past biblical events is essential to understand when future events will occur that the Bible is prophesied about. In Matthew 16, we see Jesus rebuking the Pharisees and Sadducees for their inability to recognize the time and season they were living in. Matthew 16:2 and 3, He answered and said unto them, When it is evening, ye say, It will be fair weather, for the sky is red. And in the morning it will be foul weather today, for the sky is red and lowering. O ye hypocrites, ye can discern the face of the sky, but can ye not discern the signs of the times? The Pharisees and Sadducees failed to realize that they were in the time of Jesus' first coming, an event prophesied in the Bible centuries earlier. This event marked the time when God would do away with the nation of Israel due to their unfaithfulness of committing spiritual fornication, or going after false gods. After Jesus died on the cross, the tearing of the temple veil symbolized
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Timeline series. I'm here with Brian. Brian, you there?
I'm here.
Okay. Yeah, that intro went a little bit too longer than expected. Okay, yeah, so we're just gonna pick up from where we left off on the timeline. I believe it was Abraham or Isaac, so we'll just go through that again.
Okay.
And, I guess I'll start and then I'll give it to Brian. All right. Can everyone see my screen? Brian, can you just confirm?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay. And how's my sound?
Sounds good to me.
Okay. All right, so we're just gonna get right into it. If you're new to watching this series, feel free to check out our older timeline video series videos, which can be found right here. If you click that, and there's a little playlist icon right here. And so far we have 3 episodes. Today would be episode number 4. So that's going to show up here. So you're welcome to watch this while you go through the timeline. If you hit this arrow, you can shrink the video like that. And then you can close out of it like that. All right. So where we left off was Isaac, but we're going to just start with Abraham. I'm actually going, yeah, we'll start with Abraham. Okay. So Abraham was born, in the year 8846. That's 8,846 years of Earth's history. And this is the BC year of 2167. So if you click Abraham right here, we can read his tab. And again, there's a star right next to Abraham, and what that tells us is that Abraham was that means that Kerasim was used, called his name. It's immediate father-son relationship. So Isaac was an immediate son of Abraham. Genesis 21:3, and Abraham called the name Kerasim of his son that was born unto him, whom Sarah bare to him, Isaac. And Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born unto him. And Abraham lived a total lifespan of 175 years. Genesis 25:7. And these are the days of the years of Abraham's life which he lived, 100 years. Now, if you don't know how much a score is, it's 20. So 20, 40, 60 would be 3 score. And then you add the 15. So 60 plus 15 would be 75. So 175 years. And you can see his number right here on his blue rectangle box. And then as far as the math, we're up to Abraham when Isaac was born. So that's when Abraham was 100. Isaac was born. So the year is 8946. That's the Earth year. And then the BC year would be minus 2067. Okay. And then we're going to go to Isaac and Jacob. So again, Isaac has the gold star. It's an immediate father to Jacob. And Jehovah said unto her, Genesis 25:23, and Jehovah said unto her, 2 nations are in thy womb, and 2 manner of people shall be separated from thy bowels, and the one people shall be stronger than the other. And the elder shall serve the younger. Give me 1 second. I just want to make sure that.
Just for context, when it says, and Jehovah said to her, historically, this is God talking to Rebekah, who is the wife of Isaac and the mother of Jacob and Esau.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. Let's see where I left. Where did I leave off?
Let's start the rest again.
Okay. Genesis 25:23. And Jehovah said unto her, 2 nations are in thy womb, and 2 manner of people shall be separated from the bowels, and the one people shall be stronger than the other people, and the elder shall serve the younger. Then Genesis 25:24. And when her days to be delivered were fulfilled, behold, there were twins in her womb. And the first came out all red, all over like an hairy garment, and they called his name Esau. And incidentally, called his name is used here with Esau. Oops. I just didn't put it. Okay. Genesis 25:26. And after that came his brother out, and his hand took hold on Esau's heel, and his name was called Kerasim, Jacob. And Isaac was 80 years old when she bare them. So again, a score is 20, 20, 40, 60. So there we have our 60. Jacob was born when Isaac was 60, and so was Esau. And because they're twins, they're obviously born the same year. Genesis 35:28. In the days of Isaac were 104 years. Genesis 35:29. And Isaac gave up the ghost, and he died, and was gathered unto his people, being old and full of days, and his sons Esau and Jacob buried him. Incidentally, Jacob and Esau were born 120 when Isaac died at 180. We saw above that Isaac was 60 years old when Jacob and Esau were born. If you subtract 180 from 60, you get 120. We know Jacob died at 147, but we don't know when Esau died. However, based off this, we know he lived to be at least 120. And then again, the math is right here. We added the 100 for when Isaac was born to Abraham, and now we add the 60 for when Isaac had Jacob. And then I don't know if you want to take over from here, Brian.
Okay. So we'll read Levi, I guess.
Yeah.
Now,
Jacob's tablet for Levi.
Maybe we should go through Joseph first.
Okay.
All right. So Genesis 30:24, and she called his name Joseph, and this would be historically referencing Rachel, who's the mother of Joseph and Benjamin. And she called his name Joseph and said, Jehovah shall add to me another son. And Joseph is not a timeline patriarch. However, we do know that Joseph was 17 years old when he was sold into slavery in Egypt. In Genesis 37:2, we read, these are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brethren, and the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and with the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and Joseph brought unto his father an evil report. And Bilhah and Zilpah, these would have been the handmaids of Rachel and Leah, and each of those handmaids bore two sons to Jacob. Anyway, his brothers envied him, and in Genesis 37:4 we read, and when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him and could not speak peaceably unto him. And then we go down to verses 26 and 26. And Judas said unto his brethren, what profit is it if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him unto the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh. And his brethren were content. Then there passed by Midianites, merchantmen, and they drew and lifted Joseph out of the pit and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver, and they brought Joseph into Egypt. So this proves that Jacob was 17 years old when he was sold as a slave into Egypt. Now we're going to prove that Joseph was 30 when he was made prime minister. And in Genesis 41:45, we read, and Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zaphan Paranah. You're going to have to apologize for my mispronunciation. And he gave him to wife Asnath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On. And Joseph went out over the land of Egypt. And the next verse says, and Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh, and he went throughout the land of Egypt. So this proves that he was 30 when he became prime minister. Now, immediately after he became prime minister, there were 7 years of feast, followed by 7 years of famine. And to prove that, we're going to start in Genesis 41:25. And Joseph said unto Pharaoh, the dream of Pharaoh is one. God hath showed Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good kine are 7 years, and 7 good ears are 7 years. The dream is one. And the 7 thin and ill-favored kine, and a kine is a cow, and the 7 thin and ill-favored kine that came up after them are 7 years, and 7 empty ears blasted with the east wind shall be 7 years of famine. This is the thing which I have spoken unto Pharaoh. What God is about to do, he showeth unto Pharaoh. Behold, there come 7 years of great plenty throughout the land of Egypt, and there shall arise after them 7 years of famine, and all the plenty shall be forgotten in the land of Egypt, and the famine shall consume the land. And the plenty shall...
Sorry about that.
No problem. And the plenty shall not be known in the land by the reason that the famine following, for it shall be grievous. For that the dream was doubled unto Pharaoh twice, it is because the thing is established by God, and God will shortly bring it to pass. So we know that immediately after Joseph became prime minister at the age of 30, that's when the 7 years of plenty began. Now, Jacob is 39 at the point when when the point of Jacob and all Joseph's brethren came into Egypt. And we know that because he was 30 when he became prime minister, and then there were 7 years of plenty, and then 2 years of the famine had passed when Jacob and his family came in. And to prove that, we're going to read Genesis 45:4, which says, "And Joseph said unto his brethren, Come near to me, I pray you. And they came near. And he said, I am Joseph your brother, whom ye sold in Egypt. Now therefore be ye not grieved, nor angry with yourselves, neither that ye sold me hither. For God did send me before you to preserve life. For these 2 years have..." Oh, you got to scroll up a little bit. No, up, 46, yeah. "For these 2 years hath the famine been in the land, and there are yet 5 years in the which there shall be neither earing nor harvest." So this tells us there's 2 years of the famine completed, there's 5 years remaining. And so again, prime minister at 30, 7 years of plenty makes him 37, plus 2 years of famine makes him 39. And then we skip down to verse 9. "Haste ye and go up to my father and say unto him, Thus saith thy son Joseph, God hath made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down unto me, tarry not." So this is immediate. "And thou shalt dwell in the land of Goshen, and thou shalt be near unto me, thou and thy children, and thy children's children, and thy flocks, and thy herds, and all that thou hast. And there I will nourish thee, for there are yet 5 years of famine, lest thou and thy household and all that thou hast come to poverty." And at this point, we're going to prove that all of Jacob's descendants came into Egypt at that time. And we're going to go to Exodus 1:1, and we're going to read the first 5 verses. "Now these are the names of the children of Israel which came into Egypt. Every man and his household came with Jacob: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, and Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. And all the souls that came out of the loins of Jacob were 70 souls, for Joseph was in Egypt already." So 70 people came into Egypt, and that does not include Joseph or his sons Ephraim and Manasseh, because they were already in Egypt. Now we're going to look at Genesis 47:9. "And Jacob said unto Pharaoh, The days of the years of my pilgrimage are 130 years. Few and evil have the days of my life been, and have not attained unto the days of the years of the life of my fathers in the days of their pilgrimage." So Jacob is 130 when he enters Egypt, and Joseph is 39 at that same time. So if we take 130 and we subtract 39, that means that Jacob was 39 when Joseph was born. And we know that Jacob was born in the
No,
year...
I think you meant to say 91. Jacob was 91.
What did I say?
I think you said 39 when he was born.
I'm sorry. Okay, so I misspoke. So Jacob, thank you for correcting me. So Jacob was 91 when Joseph was born. And so Jacob was born in 2007 BC, which is the year 9006 EA, or Earth Age. And if you take 2000 minus 2007 BC and you add 91 years, that means that Joseph was born in the year 1916 BC. Or if you take the year 9006 Earth Age and you add 91, that means that Joseph was born when the earth was 9,097 years old. And we also know that Jacob dies at the age of 110. And Joseph dwelt in Egypt, and he and his father's house, and Joseph lived 110 years. I'm sorry, I guess that shouldn't say Jacob. That's to say Joseph dies at 110.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. So you don't do it on air. Just change it after the fact. So Joseph dies at the age of 110, and we read in Genesis 15:22. "Joseph dwelt in Egypt, he and his father's house, and Joseph lived 110 years. And skipping down 4 verses to verse 26, Joseph died being 110 years old, and they embalmed him, and he was put in a coffin in Egypt. And if we take Joseph's birth year and we add 110, he was born in the year 1916 BC. You add 110 years. He died in 1806 BC. Or if you take the Earth age year 9097, you add 110 years, you get to 9207 EA. Okay. So at this point,
well, if you want, I can go through Kohath, Amram,
and Aaron.
Yeah.
Okay.
We didn't do Jacob. Yeah, well, I'll read Jacob because it's short. So give me 1 second. All right. So the Bible, so this is Jacob. The Bible does not give us a direct verse that tells us how old Jacob was when Levi was born, which is the first case, right? Because God's been giving us that
well, we haven't talked about the 4 generations yet.
Right, but just from the previous patriarchs, we were given their age.
Okay.
I don't know if this would be the first case, but we definitely have to do digging. So to find out how old Jacob was when Levi was born, we have to go backwards through the 430-year stay in Egypt. So on the timeline, we show Jacob was 70 years old when Levi was born. However, now we must prove it. So there's the 70 years right there. And if you click this little bar right here, that highlights that you need to come over here and to get more information. So we'll close out of this.
Yeah. Before we go on, I just want to mention one thing. The reason that we do know the birth and death year of Joseph, however, he's not a timeline patriarch. And the reason he's not is because we don't have any information on his descendants. We knew he had 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. We have no idea what year they were born. We have no idea what year any of his subsequent descendants were born or what their lifespans were or anything along those lines. And so that's why Joseph is not a timeline patriarch.
Yeah. And I don't think he could be, right? Because he dies a little bit before Levi, who's still the patriarch.
Yeah.
So that was the same situation with Ishmael and Sarah.
Yeah.
He outlives Sarah, so she couldn't pick up the timeline. So all right, so we read Jacob. As far as and we went through Joseph. As far as the 7 years of plenty and the 7 years of famine, that's taking place during Joseph's life, right? He's already in Egypt. So you click this, it'll say click on Joseph on the timeline to learn more. So we went over that already with Joseph's lifespan, so we'll skip that. These pharaohs, we don't have any information. They're just secular, speculative, it's speculative evidence that Mr. Campion had put together. So we don't really have any information on that. So we'll just hide that for now. And I'll just go right ahead. I'm going to go right ahead and just go over Kohath, Amram, and Aaron. And then Brian will take over and he'll explain the 430 years in Egypt. All right, so we're going to start with Levi, which is right here. Levi's up here. We're going to take his whole lifespan of 137 years. Exodus 6:16. And these are the names of the sons of Levi according to their generations: Gershon and Kohath and Merari. And the years of the life of Levi were 130 and 7 years. If you scroll down, the math continues. We're at 137. That puts us at 9,213 years. And the BC year is 1800. So you'll see that right here on the timeline, 1800, 9,213 years. Right here is the end of Levi's life. And now we're going to pick out with Kohath. Kohath, Genesis 46:11, and the sons of Levi, Gershon, and Kohath, and Merari. I'm going to mess that word up again. So Exodus 6:18, and the sons of Kohath and Amram and Izhar and Hebron and Ziel, and the years of the life of Kohath were 130 and 3 years. So that's where we get the 133, and we're adding his whole lifespan because we didn't mention it, but Kerasem is not used in the case of Levi, in Kohath, and Amram and Aaron, as they were with the patriarchs up here. So they're living at separate times, whereas these patriarchs were living co-living together at different points in time.
Yeah, so just in Genesis 5 and 11 with the Kerashem doctrine, if it's not an immediate father-son relationship, then when the previous one dies, that's the year that the successive one is born.
Right. All right, so Amram, Exodus 6:20, and Amram took him Jochebed, his father's sister, to wife, and she bare him Aaron and Moses, and the years of the life of Amram were 130 and 7 years. That's where we get the 137, and we're counting his whole life. We're going to add the 137 down here. And incidentally, you'll notice that Levi's lifespan was 137, as well as Amram's. And I believe Ishmael was also 137.
And one other thing is we know that Abraham was 10 years older than Sarah. And because remember, Isaac was born when Abraham was 100 and Sarah was 90. And Sarah died at the age of 127. And Abraham, who's also a depiction of God the Father, if he's 10 years older, if she was 127 when she died, that means Abraham would have been 137 at the time of Sarah's death.
Yeah, which is right here. He would have been 137. Yeah, so 137 is used a few times there. So the Earth's age for Amram at the end of his life is 9,486. And if you're following along, I'm doing all the math here for you, but I think it's always good to follow along and do the math for yourself, just to check out our work. And sometimes there are errors like typos that we may make. So and then the BC year is negative 1527. So that's Amram. And then finally, we're going to go to Aaron. We'll get into Moses later and how his life is broken up into 3 sections of 40 because he lived to be 120. So we'll just start with Aaron. We'll get into that later. He also wasn't a patriarch. Aaron is 83 years at the time of the Exodus. Exodus 7:7, and Moses was 80 years, which is 80, because a score is 20. And again, 80, and Aaron was 80 years old, so he's 83 when they spake unto Pharaoh. So he was born the year Amram died. He's a descendant of Amram. This is Aaron. Exodus 6:20, and Amram took him Jochebed, his father's sister, to wife, and she bare him Aaron and Moses. And the years of the life of Amram were 130 and 7. So that shows that it's a descendant of Aaron.
Yeah, the phrase Kerashem is not used again.
Right. Again, yep. So Aaron dies at age 123. Numbers 33-39, and Aaron was 123 years old when he died in Mount Hor. So there's his age, 123. You do the math, you just add 123. I didn't highlight it in yellow. I just ran out of time, but 123 will get you 9606. That's how old the Earth is from creation. And the BC year is 1407. So if you come down here to the 123, you'll see it matches right up with, if you take off the patriarchs, 123, 9606, and 1407 BC. All right. And then I'm going to hand it over to Brian. He's going to go over the 430 years bonded. Well, actually, he needs it. So basically, we're kind of going back to Levi here because we gave you the information for Levi, but we weren't able to tell you or direct you to a verse that shows that Jacob was 70 when Levi was born. So what Brian's going to do is he's going to go over the 430 years of that they spent in Egypt to prove that Jacob was indeed 70 when Levi was born. So with that, I'll turn it over to Brian.
Good. All right, so let's start with a couple of verses. In Exodus 12:40, we read, "Now the sojourning of the children of Israel who dwelt in Egypt was 430 years. And it came to pass at the end of the 430 years, even the selfsame day it came to pass that all the hosts of Jehovah went out from the land of Egypt." And we also read in Galatians 3:17, "And this I say, that the covenant that was confirmed before of God in Christ, the law, which was 430 years after, cannot disannul, that it should make the promise of none effect." However, we have an apparent contradiction, never a true contradiction. If there's ever a contradiction, the contradiction is not in the Bible, but rather in our understanding of it. But if you read Genesis 15:13, it reads, "And he said unto Abram," and this would be God speaking, "and he said unto Abram, Know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years." And in Acts 7:6 we read, "And God spake on this wise, that his seed should sojourn in a strange land, and that they should bring them back into bondage and entreat them evil 400 years." So we've got 3 verses that say 430, and we've got 2 verses that say 400. And of course, to the Bible critic, they can claim scribal error or written by men or some ridiculous nonsense. But as children of God, we always look for a way to make things harmonized. Now, fortunately, in this case, it's very simple. And the solution is...
Brian, I don't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to quickly point this out. Some people who are watching this on a phone, they say the print is kind of hard to see. I realize that it's not really designed for a phone per se. But what you can do is if you pinch your screen, you can, if you're on Zoom, right? If you're watching this video, you can zoom in by pinching your phone. I don't know if you know how to zoom into a photo or to a web page on your phone, but if you do that, you'll be able to zoom in. I just did it on Zoom. I'm not sure if you can do it with the YouTube video, but if you're on Zoom, try that and see if you can see the text a lot better. Okay, you can finish.
Okay. So the solution is they were in Egypt for a grand total of 430 years, but they were only afflicted for 400 of those years. So therefore, there must be the difference between 430 and 400. Therefore, there was a 30-year period where there was no affliction. And it turns out that 30 years of no affliction would have been the first 30 years they were there. And of course, this makes sense historically due to the fact that Joseph was we just read, Joseph was prime minister. He was second in command. And the Egyptians would have been very careful not to mistreat the Israelites during his rule. Though it should be noted that because Joseph was 39 when they entered Egypt, 30 years later when the affliction began, 39 plus 30 is 69. So he would have been 69 when the affliction began. And 69 is a very interesting number because it's 3 times 23, and 23 is a number that's greatly, 3 is God's purpose, 23 is greatly associated with the Great Tribulation. And he died 41 years later at the age of 110. So he actually lived 41 years after the affliction period began. But we do know that after Joseph died, with him out of the picture, the affliction of the Israelites increased. And in Exodus 1:8, we read, "Now there rose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph." And 3 verses later, in verse 11, we read, "Therefore they did set over them taskmasters to afflict them with burdens, and they built for Pharaoh treasure cities Pithom, and Ramesses. And then later in Exodus 5:6, we read, and Pharaoh commanded that same day the taskmasters of the people and their officers, saying, ye shall no more give the people straw to make brick, as heretofore. Let them go and gather straw for themselves. And the tale of the bricks which they made heretofore shall lay upon them. Ye shall not diminish aught thereof, for they be idle. Therefore they cry, saying, let us go and sacrifice to our God. And of course, we read in Exodus chapter 3, verse 7, and Jehovah said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people which are in Egypt, and have heard their cry by reason of their taskmasters, for I know their sorrows. So we can see as the time went on, the affliction got worse and worse. It would have started relatively minor, and then it got worse as time went on. Now, looking at the timeline patriarchs, we can prove this 430 years through alternative means. And by going through the timeline patriarchs, since two timeline patriarchs enter into Egypt at the same time, we can go through both their lines to get to the 430 years. And you can see here, Isaac's there, and he died at 180, and Jacob at 147. And you can see Levi's life is broken up. He lived a total of 137 years. And you can see that the first 60 years are blue and the last 77 years are green. And he was, and then Kohath was 133 and Amram was 137. And then Aaron life, like Levi, is broken into two parts, but it's reversed because the green is on the left and the blue is on the right. And so Aaron was 83 at the time of the Exodus. So in this case, if you take the 77, the 133, the 137, and the 83, that adds up to the 430. And the first 60 years of Levi don't count because that was before Jacob and his family entered into Egypt. And likewise, at the tail end, the last 40 years of Aaron, he was in the wilderness. And so the last 40 years of Aaron also do not count. And if you click Jacob, he lived a total of 147. And if you click it, you can see he lived 130 when he went into Egypt, and we already read that verse. And he lived a whole total of 147. Therefore, he lived in Egypt 17 years. And the affliction would have began 13 years after he died. And I think if you click the 17, it'll show that, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna click it.
Okay.
I don't know if you want to read this first.
Okay. So there's two ways to go through this. As we saw with the flood date on the timeline, you can take the quick path and go directly 7,000 years to arrive at May 21, 2011, or we can take the more detailed route to arrive at May 21, 2011. Similarly here, with the 430-year timeline, we can take the quicker route with Jacob, and we know what year Jacob or Israel was born. That was 2007 BC or 9006 EA or Earth Age. And you take his birth year, you add 130 years, which was the age when he entered Egypt, and then you add 430 years, because as we've already stated, they were 430 years in Egypt. And so if you take Jacob's birth year of 2007 BC, you add 130 for his age when he entered Egypt, you add 430 years in Egypt, the Exodus would have been in the year 1447 BC.
I'll show that on the timeline. So what he's speaking of is right here. So we know Jacob entered at 130. So if you take the 130 plus the 430, that gets you to the end of that gets you to the Exodus.
Okay. And using the biblical years, he was born in the year 9006 EA after creation. Again, you add 130, which is age when he entered Egypt. You add 430 in Egypt, and that's the year 9566 EA. It was the year of the Exodus. So alternatively, as we saw above, you can go through Levi to arrive at the 430 years. However, unlike with the short way, we don't start with Jacob, but with Levi.
Show them again on the graph. So up here we started with Jacob, but this time we're going to go through Levi, which at age 60, Levi entered in to Egypt the same year that Jacob did at 130.
And Joseph would have been 39 that same year as well, although it's not shown in the graph.
Right.
I
think you left off with investing the 4 generations.
Okay.
Investigating.
So the 430-year timeline starts with the patriarch Levi and ends with the patriarch Aaron. However, as you can see, we don't count the entire lifespans of Levi and Aaron, and that's because we only count the portion of their life that they spent in Egypt. And if you scroll above, that's again why Levi, the first 60 years are blue, because he wasn't in Egypt, so they don't count towards the 430. And likewise, Aaron, the last 40 years don't count because he spent those last 40 years in the wilderness. And we know there's 4 generations because in Genesis 15, we'll read verses 13 to 16. And this is referring to God, historically, this is God speaking to Abram. And he said unto Abram, know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. And also the nation whom they shall serve will I judge, and afterwards they shall come out with great substance. And thou shalt go to thy fathers in peace. Thou shalt be buried in a good old age. But in the 4th generation they shall come hither again, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. So what are the 4 generations? Well, we discount Jacob and Joseph. And so the 4 are Levi, Kohath, Amram, and Aaron. So you may think to start the count with Joseph, as he was the first one that entered Egypt. The reason that the line of Joseph doesn't work is because you don't have any information regarding the lifespan of any descendants of his. So he is not a timeline patriarch. Also, Moses and Aaron were descendants of Levi, not Joseph. So we also can't start with Jacob as generation 1 in this case, even though he lived in Egypt for 17 years of his life. If we started with him, that would make it 5 generations instead of 4. So it turns out the first generation is actually Levi. And counting backwards, we can get to Levi's age, the time he entered with Egypt.
I'll just go back up so you can see that.
So we know that Aaron was 83 at the time of the Exodus. And then you add the entire lifespan of Amram is 137. You add the entire lifespan of Kohath, and I believe that adds up to 353 years.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Yeah, so you got 83, 137, 133. That gives you 353.
Yeah. So we know that they spent a grand total of 430 years. So if you just take the difference, if you take 430 and you minus 353, that means that Levi spent 77 years in Egypt. And since we know that Levi lived a total of 137 years, and we can prove that in Exodus 6:16, these are the names of the sons of Levi according to their generations: Gershon and Kohath and Merari, and the years of the life of Levi were 130 and 7 years. So if we know he was 77 years in Egypt and he lived a grand total of 137, take 137, you subtract 77, that means that he was 60, Levi was 60 when he entered Egypt. So we're reverse engineering to figure out Levi's age. And we did say that earlier, that we would prove it later when we clicked on the Levi icon.
Mhm.
And was there more about below this, or is that it?
I think there might be some more. Yep. So yeah, we just concluded that Levi was 60 years old when he entered Egypt.
Yeah, so we have already established that Jacob and Joseph were 130 and 39 respectively at the time of the entering of Egypt. And we know that Levi would have to be between these two ages when he entered Egypt, and 60 fits perfectly into that. There is no verse that tells us directly how old Levi was when he entered Egypt. However, what appears most likely is Jacob was 60 when he started working for Laban. He served 7 years for Rachel, well, for Leah rather, and he would have married Rachel.
Probably should mention that this is in Mr. Camping. Which book was it that he went over?
Adam Wen.
Adam Wen. So yeah, he did speculate that Jacob entered in at the age of 60, and then he explained why. That Jacob started working for Laban when he was 60 years old. So there's no verse that says that, but there was a little bit of speculation. But because this is not part of
the later study,
right, and we'll get to that more in a later study. But because it's not part of the timeline, it's not doesn't affect the timeline.
So yeah. But Mr. Do you want to go through this, or do you want to skip this for later?
I guess we could save it for later. So we'll eventually close this. We'll eventually go through Jacob's life events when we get at another time. Yeah, it looks like we're getting close to 7:30. So okay. I think that covered everything.
All right.
If anyone has any questions, feel free to raise your hand. I think we only have about 10 minutes left. And then in the meantime, if no one has a question, we might go through oh, we do have one question here. All right. All right, you can go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, hi Carl. Hi Brian.
Hi.
Yeah, this is a really good website. My only only problem is when I open it, I can't scroll to the right, or I don't know why. But can you explain that?
Yeah, I can try. I'm not using a PC, so I have a trackpad that allows me to scroll to the left. But I guess you know what, you can use the arrows on I believe on your computer, on your keyboard, and this will allow you to scroll to the left and to the right. You may want to try it
because there's no scroll bar at the bottom, right?
Yeah, maybe there, but it may be difficult. I'll have to figure that one out. Yeah, I'll get back to you on that. But I do know for sure you can use the arrows to scroll like that. You hold it down. Yeah, the arrows on your keyboard.
So I'm going to go over to that.
Sure.
I have it opened up.
Yeah, I'll try to. I'll try.
Yeah. Yeah, it does work.
Okay, good. It's not as ideal as being able to scroll with the bar, so I'll try to get that fixed as soon as possible.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. If anyone else has a question, we have some time left. A question about the timeline or anything that we went over. And then while we're waiting for that, in the meantime, what we're going to do is I'm not sure what we'll do for the next episode. We do need to go over Moses, but once we get through Moses, that we get into the period of the judges, which actually technically start with Moses, but I think that's going to take some time. So I think Ryan's going to go through the Kerasem doctrine to show more proofs of that. I believe next time. I'm not sure. So it may take us a little bit of time before we actually get into we continue on through the timeline. But I do want to go over some things we might have missed with the flood account, because I think we had skipped this one of the times. So while we're waiting for, if anyone else has questions, you can raise your hand. But in the meantime, we do have a little bit of time, so we'll go ahead and go into this. So as you recall, we went through Noah's 502. Shem was 98 at the time of the flood. And then from here, you can go right into the 7,000 timeline that takes you all the way to May 21, 2011, which is right there. Oh, we do have a question, so we'll take that first. All right, Jeffrey.
Hey, I remember going through this, and I was reading Time Has an End, and Mr. Camping had also explained how Moses and Aaron
Mm-hmm.
not have been immediate children to Amram and Jochebed. Children to Amram and Jochebed, which I think in the past, a lot of Christians had thought that those were his parents, and that was kind of an obstacle trying to figure out the timeline. Do you guys talk about that at all?
I was going to go through that in the Karashem study.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can find this.
Yeah, I think Karasem's not mentioned, right, Brian? With
No,
Aaron?
it's not. However, if you want to read the if you go to Exodus 2, can you bring that up on the screen?
Here.
And I want you to notice that God very carefully does not mention either Amram or Jochebed. We'll start in verse 1. And there went a man of the house of Levi and took to wife a daughter of Levi. And the woman conceived and bare a son. And when she saw him that he was a goodly child, she hid him 3 months. And when she could not longer hide him, she took for him an ark of bulrushes and daubed it with slime and with pitch, and put the child therein. And she laid it in the flags by the river's brink. And his sister stood afar off to wit what would be done to him. And the daughter of Pharaoh came down to wash herself at the river, and her maidens walked along by the river's side. And when she saw the ark among the flags, she sent her maid to fetch it. And when she had opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the babe wept. And she had compassion on him, and said, This is one of the Hebrews' children. Then said his sister to Pharaoh's daughter, Shall I go and call to thee a nurse of the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for thee? And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, Go. And the maid went and called the child's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said unto her, Take this child away and nurse it for me, and I will give thee thy wages. And the woman took the child and nursed it. And the child grew, and she brought him unto Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. And she called his name, and it's the same phrase, Karashem, and she Karashemed Moses, and she said, Because I drew him out of the water. Notice God very carefully makes no reference of Amram or Jochebed. In verse 1, it says, And there went a man of the house of Levi, and he took to wife a daughter of Levi. So God very carefully did not use their names. And it's because they died the year that Moses was born. Excuse me, the year that Aaron was born. No. Yeah, the year Aaron was born.
Yeah, because Moses isn't the patriarch. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
If anyone else has a question, we got a little bit more time left before we start the Bible reading with Guy Barry. So feel free to raise your hand. If not, I'm just going to go back to the flood. So I'm not really sure how much we went into this with the 7,000 year timeline. But we did, I'm not sure if we went over this, but this is the 6,023 years of Earth's history, right? The flood. And then in 2 Peter 3:5, we read, "For this they willingly are ignorant of that by the word of God the heavens were of old, and the earth standing out of the water and in the water." 2 Peter 3:6, "Whereby the world that then was being overflowed with water perished." And then I broke this up into two categories. Now you have the second world, which is the last 7,023 years. We do have another question, so I'm just going to take that. All right, Ariel, you can go ahead. 1,023 years.
Yes, are we gonna be able to put this on a laminated kind of a poster so we can, use it like in the classroom or something?
Yeah, it would be nice. I'm not really. I think we're getting a little bit of feedback because you have your YouTube video open. But give me 1 second. Yeah, if you zoom out, you can see that you could make it. I'm not really sure how it would turn out. I guess we'd have to see. But you could definitely probably make something like that. You just wouldn't be able to open up these individual boxes that we have here. But of course, these always could be printed out and laminated. These little bits of information that explain. So, yeah, it's a possibility. It's something I would have to look into.
Oh, thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. Len's laptop.
Hi. Did you say that Jochebed and Amram died in the same year that who was born, Aaron or Moses?
I initially said Moses, but it was really Aaron because Aaron was the timeline patriarch, not Moses. Well, we don't know what year Jochebed died. We know that Aaron was born the year that Amram died.
So Aaron was born the year Amram died. So then how is he brother to Moses then? Because Moses was born after he was.
Moses and Aaron are brothers, and Aaron was 3 years older. Amram was the timeline patriarch who preceded them. So, for example, Levi was the timeline patriarch, and the year that Levi died was the year that Kohath was born. The year that Kohath died is the year that Amram was born. The year that Amram died was the year that Aaron was born. And 3 years later, Moses was born because he was 3 years younger. And we know that because Aaron was 83 and Moses was 80 at the time of the Exodus.
I think maybe were you referring to? So we don't know the father of Aaron and Moses, but we know that they came from Amram.
Correct.
So one of his, this is why we put the DO, that stands for descendant. Previously, we would put the, if it was an immediate father-son relationship, we would put that. But if it has the initials DO, that's descendant of. So Kohath was a descendant of Amram. Same thing with Aaron. He was a descendant of Amram, but this was an immediate father-son relationship. So at some point in Amram's life, he had a son, and that is who bore Aaron and Moses.
That was why when I read the passage from Exodus 2, remember, God is very, very precise in the Bible. And I read the whole passage of where Moses became the son of Pharaoh's daughter. And very carefully, God simply said in Exodus 2:1, "And there went a man of the house of Levi and took to wife a daughter of Levi." God very specifically does not name them. Nowhere in that passage do the names Amram or Jochebed come up. And it was because they were not the immediate parents. And again, we don't know anything about the lifespan of Jochebed, but we know that Amram died the year that Aaron was born.
Does Moses, Aaron, and Miriam, they all have the same father?
I would assume so, although the Bible doesn't explicitly state that.
Well, he says your brother, so doesn't he mention Aaron, his brother?
Yes.
So unless
So
Yeah.
I would assume they have the same parents. But again, they're unnamed. We don't know. Just like when you go back to the beginning, if you go all the way back to the first timeline patriarchs, where it said, Adam was the immediate father of Seth. Seth was the immediate father of Enos. And then it said, and Seth was, what was it, 90 years, and he begat Canaan. So we don't know what the name of Enos's child was, who was the ancestor to Canaan. We only know that that child was born when Enos was 90 years old, and then Canaan was born the year that Enos died. So too here, we don't know the name of Amram's immediate children. We only know that Aaron was a descendant of Amram, and he was born the year that Amram died.
So there's
And-
no immediate father-son relationship. It's a descendant, a grandson, a great grandson, that type of thing. Well, it looks like we run out of time. It's time for the Bible reading, so we're gonna have to wrap it up. Thanks again, and stay tuned for the Bible reading by Guy Berry.